Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a time where queens didn't bathe. Perfume masked rot, and a royal smile could quite literally kill the mood. Elizabeth I wasn't just a ruler, was a performance. Beneath the jewels and powdered skin was a woman terrified of water, obsessed with image, and determined to stay untouchable. Hygiene? It wasn't about health, it was theatre. And what she did to maintain that illusion will leave you stunned, from brushing her teeth with sugar to turning black. Decaying teeth into fashion statements, you wouldn't have lasted a day in her court. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is over there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Among the most iconic figures in English history, and perhaps the world few, leave a legacy as unforgettable as Queen Elizabeth I. She wasn't just a powerful monarch, a brilliant strategist, or a woman who held her throne for 44 years in a male-dominated world. She was also the central character in some of the strangest stories ever told about personal hygiene. That might sound odd, but once you learn, she brushed her teeth with sugar, didn't bathe for months, and turned tooth decay into a fashion trend. You'll understand why we're devoting an entire sleepy evening to her bizarre, squeaky clean habits. And just to be clear, we're not talking about your great-aunt's questionable spa routines. This is Elizabeth I, daughter of King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn's mother, beheaded for treason, rising to the throne in chaos. Elizabeth transformed England into a world power, crushed the mighty Spanish Armada, defended Protestantism, and ruled with intellect, steel, and a flawlessly curated appearance. But that appearance didn't come from soap and warm water. It came from layers of lead-based makeup, mercury-red lips, and hand-applied rose water. Elizabeth wasn't cleansed, she was performed. A woman surviving in a man's world had to become a myth, and that myth had to smell like lavender. She proudly called herself the Virgin Queen, a title as sacred as it was stressful. It meant there could be no cracks in the illusion. No body odor, no aging, no reality. If even a drop of sweat betrayed her, the illusion might crumble. So she made cleanliness into an art, not with showers, but with sheer belief. Belief that water could make you sick. Belief that perfume could mask rot. Belief that, if you smelled good enough, no one would dare question. Why focus on her 5 strangest hygiene habits? Because they're not just weird, funny, or shock-worthy. They reveal an entire era. In the 16th century, hygiene wasn't about fighting germs, it was about hiding smells. Washing hands? Optional. Wearing scented gloves? Essential. And Elizabeth, driven by a deep fear of losing control, took it to the extreme, turning odor into myth, tooth rot into fashion, and her very body into something sacred, untouchable, even by time itself. Imagine a woman rising every morning not to shower, but to be gently dabbed by maids with cloth soaked in vinegar and herbs. A woman who banned mirrors in her chambers for fear of glimpsing her true face, blistered beneath the lead paint. A woman who wore crimson wigs to hide the baldness caused by mercury. Her body was no longer just flesh, it was a throne. That might sound absurd at first, but beneath the absurdity is a deeply human fear. The fear of being exposed. For Elizabeth, a wrinkle, a missing tooth, or a fainting spell could be weaponized by enemies. So she chose to become an image white as porcelain, sweet as roses, and never washed. That's why tonight, we begin our journey with 5 of Queen Elizabeth I's most horrifying hygiene habits. Not to mock her, but to understand what it costs to be a legend. When cleanliness becomes ritual, and cosmetics become armor, you begin to see that sometimes maintaining an illusion is harder than ruling an empire. So, Are you ready to step into the Queen's private world? No running water. No flush toilets. Just secrets that will make you sleepy. And maybe slightly horrified. And now, let's start with the first bizarre truth. Brushing her teeth with sugar. Part 2. Disgusting Habit 1. Brushing her teeth with sugar. If there was anything that thrilled Queen Elizabeth I more than defeating the Spanish Armada, it was sugar. Yes, that sweet, crystalline substance wasn't just a treat. In Elizabeth's court, sugar was a soft weapon of power, rare, expensive, and regal. The Queen didn't just eat sugar, she immersed herself in it, as if it ran through the veins of an empire on the rise. Candied violets, syrup-drenched fruits, sweet marzipan. Her meals were sugar symphonies. For Elizabeth, sugar wasn't just a flavor, it was a statement of victory, wealth, and dental catastrophe. At a time when toothpaste didn't exist and toothbrushes were little more than rags or twigs, Elizabeth concocted her own recipe. Herbs, crushed roots, and believe it or not, sugar. That's right. The very thing destroying her teeth was what she used to clean them. It was like pouring gasoline on a fire and hoping it would go out. But she didn't stop there. Her brushing routine included abrasive powders made from ground seashells, crushed eggs, and gritty minerals that wore down tooth enamel like sandpaper. The result? Her once graceful royal smile decayed into a dental tragedy. Her teeth turned black, cracked, and fell out. Some were jagged, others missing entirely. And her breath? It was reportedly so foul that those near her had to lean away. At times, people struggled to understand her because her words were shaped by a mouth rotting from the inside out. Still, she refused to have her teeth pulled, terrified of pain. One loyal courtier even volunteered to have a tooth removed in front of her, to prove that it wasn't deadly. But Elizabeth stood firm. Pain, however brief, was not worth losing control. Then came the strangest twist of all. Instead of mocking her, the noble women in court started mimicking her appearance. They darkened their own teeth with soot and charcoal to look more like the Queen. In their eyes, black teeth were a symbol of loyalty, elegance, and elite status. If the Queen had black teeth, then black teeth meant beauty. In the world of Elizabeth, even decay could become high fashion. And if you asked a lady of the court why she'd paint her smile with ash, she'd likely whisper, "Because I serve a legend." In Part 3, Disgusting Habit 2, Never bathed. Only dabbed with perfumed water. One of the most infamous quotes attributed to Queen Elizabeth I goes something like this: "I bathe once a month, whether I need it or not." Whether or not she truly said that, the line captures a very real mindset of her era. Water was dangerous. In the 16th century, many believed that bathing allowed toxic miasmas invisible, poisonous air stows seep into the skin and cause illness. And Elizabeth, who lived in constant fear of losing control, firmly embraced this belief. So, she almost never bathed. Instead of immersing herself in water, Elizabeth changed her linen undergarments called shifts multiple times a day. Back then, people believed that soft linen could absorb sweat, dirt, and even toxins from the skin. Changing clothes was, in their eyes, a form of washing. If your shift was clean, then surely your body was too logical. If you lived 5 centuries ago and had never truly smelled someone who hadn't showered in a week, but Elizabeth took her dry hygiene even further. When she needed to freshen up, she turned to her private arsenal of perfumed waters, rose water, diluted vinegar, and specially prepared herbal infusions crafted by royal apothecaries. Her maids would gently dab these liquids onto her skin, never rubbing, never scrubbing, and certainly never pouring. There was no soap, not steam, nor soaking. Each ritual was performed with reverence, as though cleansing a sacred relic. To Elizabeth, her body wasn't merely flesh, it was a symbol of divine authority, untouchable by time, by illness, or even by water. Bathing, in its traditional sense, was also an ordeal. To draw a bath for the Queen meant dragging in a large wooden tub, heating dozens of buckets of water, and coordinating several servants just to manage the process. Privacy was scarce, comfort minimal, and for Elizabeth, it wasn't worth the hassle. Why bother when a few elegant dabs with a rose-scented cloth could do the trick? And then there was her makeup. Elizabeth's iconic white face, paint made from leadened, bright red lips courtesy of mercury-based pigments, were masterpieces of illusion. A bath could ruin all of it. Water might reveal what lay beneath. A woman aging, vulnerable, imperfect. And for a queen who had carefully crafted herself into a myth, that was unthinkable. So, she protected the illusion. Her skin was never truly washed. Her royal robes were infused with scents. She owned gloves soaked in perfumes, handkerchiefs doused in floral oils, and gowns layered to trap fragrance and hide decay. She didn't move through her palace-ish, glided, like a walking garden of roses and rosemary, a fragrance so overwhelming it could make you swoon both from delight and, possibly, from nausea. They say once she passed down a corridor, and courtiers felt faint because of how strongly she smelled, but no one questioned it. No one dared suggest that behind all those layers of rosewater was a woman who hadn't bathed in weeks, sometimes even months. Because in Elizabeth's world, scent meant purity. If she smelled divine, then she must be clean. She had redefined cleanliness not as a state of being, but as an aura, a fragrance, an illusion so carefully maintained that it became her truth. This is what made Elizabeth I so extraordinary. She didn't bathe, but no one would dare call her unclean. She had power, and with power came the ability to reshape reality. To convince the world that perfume could replace soap, that dabbing was bathing, that a queen untouched by time or water could still rule an empire. Bathing or not bathing? For Elizabeth, it was never a question. It was a calculated decision, and once she chose scent over scrubbing, the world followed, willingly or while discreetly pinching their noses. Part 4. Disgusting Habit 3. Never washing her face or hair. There was something curious about Queen Elizabeth something today's world would find hard to imagine. She almost never washed her face. Not because she lacked the means, not out of laziness, but for a reason far stranger. Water might wash away her precious makeup, and for Elizabeth, that was simply unacceptable. Her skin had already been damaged beyond repair by the daily use of Venetian cerusia, toxic white paste made of lead and vinegar. It left her with sores, peeling skin, and deep scars. But rather than stop using it, or even try to clean her face, Elizabeth chose a different path. She added more. Each morning, a new coat of paste went on top of yesterday's, and at night, instead of removing it, she'd smooth it down with oils and sleep with it still one entombed in elegance, layer upon layer. The makeup built into a fragile, plaster-like mask. Her ladies whispered that one wrong touch could cause it to crack and flake off like chalk dust, scattering across her royal robes and shattering the illusion she so carefully maintained. And it wasn't just her face. Elizabeth's real hair suffered a similar fate. Instead of washing it, she used egg whites and sugar water to stiffen it into shape. To complete the look, she powdered it, white transforming her crown of hair into a crisp, silent symbol of control. But as the toxins took their toll, her hair began to fall out in clumps. Elizabeth, ever the strategist, didn't panic, adapted. Wigs became her new reality. Thick, curled, flame-red wigs, styled with meticulous care to keep her public image unchanged. The real hair beneath thinning, brittle and lifeless, was hidden away. A private truth no one dared to acknowledge. Rumors swirled that she banned mirrors from her private chambers, afraid to glimpse the reality beneath her mask. That face pale, rough, and decaying had no place in the myth she had so carefully crafted. Instead, she employed a dedicated servant for shoulder powdering. Yes, there was someone whose sole job was to reapply makeup to her neck and shoulders areas most prone to cracking. This way, even if she turned her head, tilted her chin, or moved unexpectedly, no one would ever see a break in the illusion. Elizabeth transformed from a living woman into a living icon, a goddess made of lead, pride, and powder, and like all ancient deities, she became a prisoner of her own legend. Never washing her face or hair wasn't just a strange habit, it was a philosophy, a choice. Elizabeth didn't care about being cleanse, she cared about being perfect, and the price she paid was that no one, not even herself, was allowed to see the truth. Part 4. Disgusting Habit 4. Wearing deadly toxic makeup. If there's one thing people remember about Queen Elizabeth I beyond her throne and victory over the Spanish Armades, her face, white as porcelain, smooth as sculpted stone, and nearly otherworldly in its perfection. But beneath that iconic beauty wasn't the skin of a queen, it was a mask made of poison. Her secret weapon? Venetian cerusia, luxurious cosmetic, hailed in its time as the pinnacle of elegance. It was made from white lead mixed with vinegar, two ingredients that today would have dermatologists recoiling in horror, but back then, pale skin was the ultimate status symbol. It meant you didn't labor outdoors. It meant you were noble, protected from the sun. It meant you were wealthy and untouchable. Elizabeth didn't just use Venetian cerussea, depended on it. Each day, she applied a thick layer, not only to hide smallpox scars but to erase wrinkles, freckles, and every visible trace of aging. And as her skin began to react to oozing sores, flaking patches, ulcers from lead poisoning, she didn't stop. She just added more, one layer atop another, until her face became a cold, motionless mask, impenetrable, unmoving, immune to scrutiny. But the poison didn't stop at her cheeks. Elizabeth also painted her lips with a brilliant red concoction laced with mercury, a powerful neurotoxin. The color gave her an aura of power, elegant sand, a slow, steady decline. Records describe her becoming increasingly forgetful, irritable, emotionally volatile, with trembling hands and fragile health. But Elizabeth refused to surrender. To her, that painted face was no longer her own, it had become a symbol of the monarchy itself. She controlled her image with an iron grip. No official portrait could show her as she truly was. Every painting had to follow an idealized template, replicating her younger visage. Even in old age, she appeared in art as a radiant, eternal goddess, never tired, never flawed, never human. It wasn't vanity, it was propaganda. A carefully curated illusion enforced by royal decree. When receiving visitors, Elizabeth would wear towering wigs, jeweled masks, and layers of makeup so thick that diplomats claimed they could smell the chemicals before they saw her. One foreign ambassador confessed that he avoided eye contact not out of reverence, but out of fear that the makeup might fall off. But that was the genius of Elizabeth. She didn't need to be real. She needed to be perfect. And perfection, no matter how toxic, was power. No one dared question it. No one stripped away the mask. Because doing so wasn't just an insult to a woman, it was heresy against a legend. Today, we understand that the substances Elizabeth used were lethally dangerous. But for her, it was a price worth paying. She wasn't using makeup to enhance her beauty, she was using it to defend her throne. That iconic face wasn't allowed to crack, even if, underneath, Her skin was rotting away. Part 6. Disgusting Habit 5. When rotting teeth became a fashion statement. In a royal court where every action of the Queen was exalted, even the most revolting habit could become the height of elegance. And so it was that when Queen Elizabeth's teeth began to rot, her courtiers didn't recoil. They copied her. Instead of drawing mockery, her decaying smile sparked a strange new fashion. Noble women began blackening their own teeth, using soot, charcoal, or powdered ashes to recreate the Queen's shadowy grin. To them, if Elizabeth had black teeth, then black teeth were beautiful. Black teeth were noble. They became a symbol of wealth, power, and allegiance to the crown. This bizarre trend had its roots in sugar, the very thing that destroyed Elizabeth's teeth. At the time, sugar was an expensive luxury, a delicacy only the rich could afford. So, in a twisted way, rotting teeth became a badge of privilege. They told the world you had the means to consume sweets every day. In Elizabeth's case, she adored candied violets, syrup-soaked fruits, marzipan desserts, and honeyed tarts. Her court was a sugar feast, and her smile bore the cost. But the damage was catastrophic. Without proper dental care, toothpaste, or any understanding of oral hygiene, her teeth turned from ivory to yellow, then to a deep, decaying black. They chipped, cracked, and fell out. Her breath became so unbearable that courtiers reportedly turned away during conversations. Some historical accounts even describe her speech as muffled, her words slurred by a tongue navigating the ruins of a collapsing mouth, and yet she refused to pull them out. Elizabeth feared physical pain more than public shame. On one occasion, a loyal courtier even volunteered to have a tooth extracted in front of her, hoping to prove it wasn't as terrible as she imagined. But the Queen declined. She kept every broken, blackened tooth right where it was, as if they were relics, not liabilities. And remarkably, people followed her lead. What began as a personal affliction became a political statement. In the glittering world of the Elizabethan court, black teeth weren't a flaw, they were fashion. A rotting smile wasn't something to hide, it was something to celebrate. If the Queen bore it with dignity, then so could her loyal subjects. Suddenly, white teeth were unfashionable. Clean teeth meant you were poor, that you couldn't afford sugar, that you lived without indulgence. In contrast, stained and crumbling teeth were a flex of status, a quiet announcement that said, "I feast like a queen." And Elizabeth? She embraced it. She never apologized for her teeth. She never tried to conceal them. On the contrary, she allowed them to define a generation's idea of beauty. Her decayed grin became part of her legend, woven into the red gowns, powdered wigs, and stone-like makeup that cloaked her body in myth. There were even rumors that she had a servant whose job was to powder her neck and jaw, ensuring no cracks in her illusion ever appeared. The body beneath might decay, but the surface remained regal. In this world, decay was not disgrace, it was devotion. Elizabeth ruled not just with her crown, but with her image. Every detail, even the grotesque ones, became part of her power. Her breath might clear a room, her teeth might terrify a dentist, but no one dared to mention it, because to insult her teeth was to insult the monarchy itself. And so, history gave us a time when bad breath, black teeth, and the refusal to pull a rotten molar became markers of royal authority, and at the center of that era stood a woman who turned her own dental decay into an emblem of glory. The immortal face, an image crafted in candlelight and paint. When a woman turns 60, she usually accepts that her face has changed. But that rule never applied to Elizabeth I. To her, age wasn't reality, it was merely a rumor. And to keep that rumor alive, she turned her face into a masterpiece of political theater. No painter was allowed to capture her true appearance. Wrinkles? Forbidden. Shadows? Unthinkable. Sagging skin or tired eyes? Erased. Artists were instructed to replicate a pre-approved portrait templatier face from her youth. Whether she was in her 30s or 60s, Elizabeth in the paintings always looked the same, radiant, unblemished, and eternally majestic. "I am not a woman. I am England," she once declared. And from that moment on, Elizabeth didn't live as a person. She lived as a symbol. Within the palace, she moved like a shadow. She avoided daylight altogether, allowing only the soft flicker of candlelight to illuminate her. This wasn't by accident. Candlelight blurred imperfections, softened the edges of her heavy makeup, and protected her image from exposure. People whispered that her makeup had become so thick and brittle, it could crack and fall off with a simple touch. But she wore it proudly, layer upon layer, like armor made of powder and paint. By then, she was no longer Elizabeth the woman. She was Elizabeth the portrait. As the years passed, her isolation deepened. She avoided mirrors, sunlight, even direct eye contact. Only a select few handmaidens were allowed near her, and they followed strict rituals, dusting her neck and shoulders with powder, ensuring that no seam in her illusion would ever be seen. The goal wasn't cleanliness, it was continuity. The image had to endure. She didn't age. She didn't change. She simply paused in time. When people spoke of her beauty, they didn't mention the real woman. They spoke of the portraits, those iconic images hanging in palace halls, where Elizabeth stood among symbols of conquest, her face shining like the sun, her gown flowing like divine fabric. These weren't just paintings. They were royal declarations, each one meticulously edited to reinforce a singular truth. The Queen does not fade. And strangely, even though everyone knew they were looking at fantasy, they believed it. Because beauty, repeated often enough, becomes its own reality. And Elizabeth mastered that truth. When her body began to fail, she didn't fight it with medicine. She fought it with image control. No one ever saw her sweat. No one ever saw her stumble. And certainly, no one ever saw her bare skin. She maintained her power not by hiding her weakness, but by replacing her humanity with myth. Toward the end of her life, she stopped dancing, stopped speaking. She vanished into velvet-draped rooms, lit by the faint glow of dying candles and perfumed with fading rosewater. Days would pass in silence. No one heard her voice. No one saw her face. And yet the paintings remained. Ladies of the court still blackened their teeth in her honor. Poets still wrote of her as the everlasting Virgin Queen, and visitors still walked the corridors lined with portraits of a woman who, in truth, had not existed for decades. Elizabeth had won the battle against Timon with magic, but with illusion. And when she closed her eyes for the final time, no one truly knew what her face looked like. Because she had erased it from memory, replacing it with an eternal mask of power, she didn't die as a woman. She became a legend, fragrance, an illusion crafted with perfume and ritual. If you think cleanliness is simply about being washed and fresh, then you've never stepped into the world of Queen Elizabeth I, when she hardly bathed, washed her hair, or even washed her face. The one thing that kept her from, well, smelling like a disaster was fragrance, a carefully crafted illusion built from perfume and ritual. Elizabeth didn't just wear perfume as an accessory, she wore it as impenetrable armor. In the Tudor court, where the faintest unpleasant odor could cause political tremors, Elizabeth was always surrounded by a thick veil of scent. Lavender, rose water, diluted herbal vinegars, and specially blended concoctions brewed in the palace's distillation chambers were not meant to cleanse the skin but to overpower any trace of natural body odor. Imagine this. On a dusty, too tense day, Elizabeth stands amid a crowd of courtiers not as a sweaty, fragile woman, but as a walking garden in full bloom, a few drops of delicate perfume behind her ears, a gentle wipe on her wrists, a scented handkerchief tucked inside her sleeve enough to make everyone around hold their breath, hesitant to come any closer. When unpleasant smells drifted too near, Elizabeth had a secret weapon, commanders. These small balls, made of metal or wood, filled with precious resins and aromatic herbs, were hidden in her skirts or hung at her waist. At the slightest whiff of something foul, she would raise one to her nose and inhale deeply. This gesture wasn't just about comfort. It was a regal declaration. I am not like you. I do not smell like the outside world. Oh, Elizabeth's entire body, from head to toe, was meticulously wrapped not only in luxurious fabrics, but in layers of carefully designed scent, creating a flawless illusion of purity. Fragrance wasn't a sign of health, it was a symbol of power. No one asked if she bathed, they simply knew she never smelled bad. Her attendants followed strict schedules, preparing personalized perfumes daily to ensure her scent was consistent and unmistakable. Once, a foreign visitor marveled upon entering her chamber, feeling as though he had stepped into an eastern garden, where lavender and rose entwined in the air, distracting him from the odd rituals and secrets of the royal court. Perfume was more than a mere fragrance, it was a psychological weapon. When Elizabeth moved through the halls, she wasn't just a woman walking, she was power in motion, a force cloaked in aroma, reminding all who sensed her presence that she was untouchable, both physically and spiritually. You might think, just shower and be clean, but for Elizabeth, cleanliness was never about washing. It was about not losing the battle of image. Fragrance formed an invisible mask that helped her hold on to the throne in a world rife with danger and gossip. Perfume became a royal ritual. Each appearance was accompanied by a delicate mist, like a thin veil on a summer's day, enough to soothe and enough to impress. This was no accident, but the result of constant effort by the Queen and her attendants. Elizabeth never walked alone. She was always accompanied by her signature censer, unique signature of power. And every member of the court tried to blend into this symphony of fragrance, becoming notes in the grand orchestration of her reign. Those who understood the Queen knew this. Fragrance was an invisible armor, shielding her from reality, from time, and from curious eyes longing to see beneath the powder and fabric. Like everything else in her life, Elizabeth's scent was no accident. It was a strategia, part of the ultimate survival art in a world full of envy and intrigue. While we may find the idea of not bathing revolting, for Elizabeth, it was a choice of power. Choosing perfume over water was choosing illusion over truth. And in her world, one scent was enough to enchant an entire kingdom. The untouchable body, when cleanliness is just a performance. Elizabeth I didn't simply see her body as part of life. To her, it was a sacred symbol, a treasure of the nation that needed to be preserved and protected at all costs. Every layer of fabric she wore, every drop of perfume on her skin, every elaborate wig she donned served one purpose: to hide the truth, keeping the image of the Queen inviolable under all eyes. She never allowed herself to be seen bare, as she believed a visible body was a sign of weakness, an opening for enemies waiting to strike. A human body, with sweat, natural odors, signs of aging and illness, was utterly unworthy of the crown she wore, so she constructed a perfect shell, an image that could never fade or be broken. From childhood, Elizabeth learned a harsh lesson. A woman could be destroyed by a single rumor. A small story, a petty suspicion, could drag a woman's reputation into a bottomless pit. That's why she took absolute control over every detail around her, from how people looked at her, smelled her, to what they imagined about her. To Elizabeth, being clean wasn't just about bodily hygiene, it meant transcending the mundane realities of human existence. She forbade sweat to appear on her skin, rejected any body odor, and concealed all truths about age, sickness, or fatigue. Her body, with all its heavy makeup, fiery red wigs, and intoxicating fragrances, was no longer flesh and blood, but a living throne. It was a symbol of power, a walking empire demanding reverence and submission from an entire kingdom. Every step Elizabeth took on the thick palace carpets was a performance of power. She did not walk like an ordinary person, but moved like an immovable monument. A living legend, shrouded in fabric and scent. Thus, cleanliness in the Tudor court was not about ordinary washing. It was a spectacle, a ritual, a weapon beyond reach. People saw Elizabeth, but never the real woman beneath. She transformed herself into an immortal symbol. Undefeated by time or truth, her body could not be defiled, weakened, or broken. She lived, existed, and ruled not with flesh, but with an illusion of power, perfection built with light, fragrance, and painted portraits, a figure history will never forget. A splendid palace, yet foul-smelling. From the outside, Queen Elizabeth I's palaces looked like a slice of heaven on earth. Towering stone walls, intricately carved and imposing, ceilings gilded with gold that shimmered under the flicker of thousands of candles. Luxurious velvet carpets stretching across grand halls, the soft, haunting melodies of violins and harps filling the air. Every detail spoke of majesty, extravagance, and untouchable power. Yet, step beyond those enormous doors, and the truth became clear. No matter how grand, Elizabeth's palaces lacked what we now consider basic amenities. There were no flushing toilets, not drainage systems, and certainly no sinks or running water. Waste was collected in ceramic chamber pots, wooden basins, or large buckets scattered discreetly throughout rooms and hallways. These pots and buckets were then emptied directly into cesspit simple holes dug deep underground, where raw human waste accumulated without treatment or sanitation. The air inside the palace was a potent mix of human excrement, urine, rotting food scraps, and the carcasses of small animals. Though servants burned herbs like rosemary, leander, and wormwood, and strewn dried flowers across floors in attempts to mask the stench. The foul odor was relentless. It clung to the walls, seeped into the stone and wood, and hung thickly in every corridor. Because of this overwhelming stench, Elizabeth frequently moved her court not only for political reasons, but also to escape living amid the uncontrollable decay. While the palaces gleamed with golden opulence on the surface, the stone floors remained soaked with filth and dampness, harboring a hidden world of rot. This was a paradox, a realm where power and putrefaction coexisted beneath a vaulted stone roof. Elizabeth, the most powerful woman in England, ruled amid a kingdom where grandeur and decay were inseparable. The royal toilet, when power was linked to waste. Despite being the most powerful person in England, Queen Elizabeth, I still had to deal with basic human needs like everyone else. But her toilet was anything but ordinary, a symbol of luxury and power intertwined with secret rituals and protocols. Unlike modern flushing toilets, Elizabeth's royal toilet was a finely crafted wooden chair, cushioned for comfort, with a hidden ceramic chamber pot underneath. This seat, known as the close stool, was a private but crucial fixture in royal life. Cleaning and maintaining the chamber pot was not the duty of ordinary servants, but entrusted to a special nobleman known as the groom of the stool, the keeper of the stool. This position was far more than a mere sanitation role. It was one of the highest ranking posts in the Tudor court. The groom of the stool was carefully selected for absolute loyalty, discretion, and intimate proximity to the Queen in her most private moments. He assisted Elizabeth with her toileting needs, helped her change clothes, and was often invited to partake in important political discussions. In the Tudor court, being close to the Queen's body even during the most delicate moments meant being close to the real centre of power. However, beyond these private moments, the rest of the palace was starkly different. filthy, damp, and reeking. There were no modern plumbing systems, no flushing toilets. Everyone used chamber pots, basins, or buckets, which were emptied into cesspits dug beneath or outside the palace walls. At night, men called night soil men quietly carried buckets of human waste through narrow corridors and staircases to dispose of them far away. Their work was unsung, malodorous, and looked down upon, yet absolutely essential for maintaining a palace of such size. The foul smell of waste permeated everywhere, clinging to stones and wood alike. It was the dark scent of power hidden beneath golden splendor, while people could be dazzled by the gleaming gold, lavish gowns, and grand ceremonies. The truth was, Elizabeth and her court lived amidst decay and disorder. It is hard to imagine that the most powerful woman in Europe relied on a close attendant to manage her waste. But in this peculiar bond, power was both preserved and conveyed. The groom of the stool was not merely a servant, but a confidant and companion to the deepest secrets of the court. Thus, in Tudor England, power was not only held on the throne, but also symbolized by the small ceramic pot beneath the Queen's Ciata, fascinating mix of grandeur and raw reality. In every aspect, Elizabeth led a sophisticated system of authority, a system that governed not only the country, but also controlled her every breath, scent, and even her waste. The unmaskable stench, the dark side of the palace, beneath a shimmering glow of thousands of candles, with thick carpets laid throughout the palace and delicate silk curtains draped across grand halls. Few would imagine the suffocating, foul-smelling world hidden inside. But that was the harsh reality. The air within Elizabeth I's palace was a heavy blend of human waste, sweat, rotting food scraps, stagnant water, and overpowering body odors. This stench was impossible to hide. Despite the court's efforts to burn fragrant herbs like rosemary, leona, and wormwood in brick ovens, scatter dried flowers across the floors, or lay down fresh rushes soaked in oils to absorb and mask the odors. However, those rushes and dried flowers were seldom replaced. Over time, they collected leftover food, shed hair, and even the carcasses of dead mice, transforming into a massive breeding ground for bacteria beneath everyone's feet. Elizabeth frequently moved her court not only for political strategy, but also to escape the unbearable stench. The longer the palace remained in one place, the more waste accumulated, and the stronger the odor grew. No amount of perfume, even the rare and precious scents from the east, could completely cover it up. This was the paradox of power, a gilded exterior concealing a rotten reality. Elizabeth lived in a world where the crown shone brightly, amid air so foul it was nearly unbreathable, and she accepted this. So long as her appearance remained flawless before her subjects and the outside world, this stark contrast revealed a brutal truth. Power does not always accompany purity. Sometimes, maintaining the throne means living among decay, masking truth with makeup, fragrance, and elaborate rituals. Still, the palace's splendor could not erase the darkness lurking in every stone and crevice, places where candlelight could not reach. Wealth, power, and beauty were but a shimmering veil over a suffocating, malodorous reality. Elizabeth, with all her strictness and perfectionism, became the symbol of a kingdom, radiant yet rotten at its core. And that is her story, a queen battling not only enemies beyond her walls, but also the stench, grime, and decay within her own palace. From stench to power, when cleanliness is a political illusion. Elizabeth I lived in a world very different from ours today. She rarely bathed, never washed her face or hair, and had no concept of hygiene as we understand it now. Yet, strangely, she was never seen as dirty or improper. On the contrary, she was admired and revered as a symbol of purity, sanctity, and inviolability. Why was this? The answer lies deep within the nature of power and politics at the Tudor court. Illusion is stronger than reality. In a court where rumours could destroy an entire dynasty, controlling one's image was paramount. Elizabeth knew that every time she avoided water, every thick layer of white makeup on her face, every gown, covering her from neck to toe, was a declaration of power. It was not merely about cleanliness, but a sophisticated strategy to maintain her status and dignity. A real, bare body without makeup or finery was not just a body, it was a vulnerability, a place where age, illness, sweat, and human odour revealed the truth, something a queen could never afford to expose. So Elizabeth transformed herself into an ageless figure, a symbol of cleanliness, not through water or soap, but through power and control. To her, cleanliness was not in the skin, but in how others perceived her. A woman who smelled sweet, showed no sweat, and bore no sign of time, was the safest symbol for a nation perpetually on the edge of rebellion. Elizabeth taught us a lesson about cleanliness as political illusion. It is not a matter of physical condition, but a product of image control. Every detail from white makeup, wigs, perfume, to rituals hiding the weakest parts of her body, was part of a veil of power. Everyone in court and among the people outside was mesmerized by this perfection. They saw an immortal queen-o age. Nor sickness, nor flaw. They did not see the wear beneath the heavy makeup, the odors masked by expensive perfume, or the carefully tended chamber pots in private rooms. Yet, it was within this illusion that power was fortified. Elizabeth was not only a ruler of the land, but a master artist of deception. A woman who turned herself into an eternal symbol. And that is why, despite her outward lack of modern cleanliness, in the eyes of her subjects, she remained the ultimate symbol of absolute purity and untouchable authority. The price of a legend, when illusion kills the real person. In her final years, Elizabeth scarcely let anyone see her true face. She avoided daylight, shunned mirrors, and lived beneath increasingly thick layers of makeup. Rumour has it that she banned mirrors from her chambers, and even employed a dedicated maid solely to powder her shoulders, in secret ensuring no one would glimpse the real skin beneath, which was peeling, inflamed, and corroded by mercury. She carried a scented walking stick, and whenever she passed by someone with an unpleasant odour, she would raise it to her nose knot, only to mask the smell, but as a subtle message. I do not belong to your world. She was no longer a human being, but a living mask of power, a shell crafted from floral scents, poisonneux cosmetics, and an absolute denial of reality. Yet it was this very denial that made her a legend. Elizabeth knew that if anyone were to see her true skin, her thinning hair, or the sores hidden beneath her luxurious gowns, the myth would shatter, and she was willing to sacrifice everything, even herself, to protect it. The illusion did not merely hide, it consumed her. Elizabeth's battle was not only with external foes, but with the relentless decay within, a struggle between the real woman and the image she forged. When she finally closed her eyes for the last time, what remained was not a fragile woman with delicate skin or vibrant red hair, but a legend sealed beneath layers of white powdera, symbol of power that time could never erase. Not the skin, but the image. Elizabeth I was not a queen clean by today's standards. She rarely bathed, seldom washed her hair, and almost never washed her face with water. Her hygiene habits might seem shocking or unhygienic to us now. Yet, paradoxically, she was seen as the perfect embodiment of purity and majesty in her own time. That image was not built on conventional cleanliness, but was the result of decades of meticulous, sophisticated, and deliberate construction. Every drop of fragrant oil, every thick layer of lead-based white makeup, every refusal to bathe or face natural light was a statement of power. Elizabeth did not need her body to be clean in the usual sense. She only needed to ensure she was never doubted, never exposed, never revealed as weak. In Tudor England, where a single rumour could cost a woman her head, Elizabeth chose a different path, to hide within an illusion, letting that illusion rule in her stead. She was not her real skin, not her natural scent, not her true teeth or hair. She was an image. And that image, no matter how toxic, heavy, or lonely, lived forever in the memory of England. She taught the world a profound lesson. To survive as a woman of power, you do not need to be clean, you need to be untouchable. Cleanliness, for here, was not about the physical body, but about how others perceived her. A woman could be riddled with odour and disease, but as long as her image was preserved, she could remain a symbol of authority. Elizabeth transformed herself into a living monument, where reality was covered by a shimmering veil. Behind that veil, she concealed all signs of weakness, all wounds inflicted by time and illness. What remained was an unchanging image, a story painted with light and colour. This forces us to reflect. Power is not just what you have, but what others see. Elizabeth ruled not only with strength and intellect, but with a masterful art of image control. She wielded makeup, wigs, perfume, and rituals to create a timeless icon. That image may have been toxic, isolating, and costly to her health and true self, but it was what kept her throne in a world full of dangers and endless conspiracies. And in the end, though she was no longer the woman with flawless skin or fiery red hair, Elizabeth I remains a living legend and image, etched into history as a symbol of power, inviolability, and sacrifice. She showed us that to survive and shine in the world of power, sometimes you do not need to be clean in the literal sense. You only need to be untouchable. Here is the English translation of the conclusion, about 1,000 words, with a respectful, insightful, and eloquent tone suitable for mature audiences. Through 5 hygiene habits, understanding the woman and the strength of Elizabeth I, Queen Elizabeth I is one of the most powerful and influential symbols in European history. Through her 5 unique and extraordinary hygiene habits, we see not just a woman with unusual practices, but a strong, strategic, and visionary individual ahead of her time. Elizabeth was not simply a woman who demanded cleanliness by conventional standards. She was a living symbol of absolute control and self-mastery in an era when image and power were almost synonymous. Her refusal to bathe, avoidance of natural light, use of toxic cosmetics, and even keeping decayed blackened teeth were not signs of laziness or ignorance, but deliberate choices and strategies to maintain her image and position. Her obsession with preserving a perfect image was so great that she willingly sacrificed her health, personal comfort, and the social norms of her day. In doing so, we see an extraordinary resilience woman who would allow nothing to threaten her power. The habit of brushing her teeth with sugar, a curious contradiction, where the very thing destroying her teeth was used to clean them, reflects the complexity of how she confronted herself. Striving to preserve beauty and perfection while enduring inevitable consequences, remarkably, she turned even her flaws into fashion, making them a hallmark of royalty, demonstrating creativity and the ability to turn adversity into advantage. Her practice of not bathing but rather wiping with rose water and herbal concoctions, avoiding water and light, reveals a subtle power strategy where protecting her image was more important than health. Elizabeth understood that a queen could never appear ordinary, could never show signs of aging or weakness. Instead, she chose to build an immortal image, eternal in the eyes of her subjects. The use of lead and mercury in her cosmetics, dangerous to her health, but helping maintain a flawless, radiant appearance, was a testament to her determination and willingness to sacrifice for the crown. She was not only a woman of her era, but a woman who transcended the limits of biology and time. Her refusal to wash her face, her use of wigs, and careful attention to every detail of her appearance showed how deeply she invested in controlling her image. Every wig, every layer of powder was not just makeup, but a weapon in the battle for loyalty and the throne. Finally, the fact that decayed, blackened teeth became a fashion symbol at court is proof of her absolute influence. What might seem like defects or weaknesses became standards to be emulated, revered, and admired. All these unconventional hygiene habits do not diminish Elizabeth's value or character. Instead, they highlight her depth as a person and as a leader. She knew how to turn weaknesses into strengths and how to harness every resource, even unconventional ones, to maintain her power and respect. From her story, we learn that strength is not always displayed through obvious or visible means. Sometimes, strength lies in secrets, l'endurance, and the ability to create a timeless image. Elizabeth taught the world a profound lesson. Power is not just about physical strength or wealth, but about controlling oneself and one's image. She lived a life where image and reality intertwined intricately, becoming a great symbol in history. Therefore, when we look back at her through these strange hygiene habits, we should not judge, but instead appreciate the intelligence, toughness, and vision of a woman who changed history by being herself. Despite all limitations, Elizabeth was not just a queen. She was a legenda, symbol of power, resilience, and the art of image making the world will never forget.